McDonald's has ruined my life. I thought it would just be a way to save money for the future while I studied at my local college, but it turned out to be the thing that ripped my future from my grasp. It all started in the summertime. I was working the drive-through window, which is as mundane of a routine as anything else you can do at McDonald's. All the orders were passing through my hands and into car windows in one monotonous blur, just like any other day. But despite the sheer number of people that passed by me during that shift, there was one individual who stuck out. The driver of the vehicle she was in was nothing special, just her whipped boyfriend. But her, I remember her. She had this awful helmet-looking wig of ketchup red hair, which just did not go with the rest of her style whatsoever. I tried not to stare. I looked up to the screen where the orders came through to see what they got. Her boyfriend got a Big Mac meal with a large Sprite, and she got a 10-piece McNugget meal with a large Hi-C. That may not seem relevant, but I only say this because I know for a fact that I did everything within my responsibility to make sure they got what they were supposed to. I handed over the drinks first. Then I held out the bag of food. I expected her boyfriend in the driver's seat to grab it, but instead she reached over and snatched it out of my hands, giving me this dirty, ravenous look as she did it. I see some weird things in the drive-thru, so that barely registered anyway. Have a nice day. They sped off out of the drive-thru, and I thought I'd never see them again. I was wrong. The woman with the ridiculously dressed hair walked inside not a minute later. I saw her as I was grabbing a McFlurry cup from the front. She was standing with her hands at her hips, impatiently waiting to speak to a manager in a very evident manner. By the time I'd made the McFlurry, the manager was with her. I wasn't really paying attention, but I could see she was being nasty for no good reason. I don't know what kind of day the manager was having, but he wasn't having any of this woman's attitude. They started screaming at each other. You come into my establishment and you insult my employees. What the hell do you think you're doing in here? I ought to take you out back and rip your damn leg off, you piece of shit! Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her spit in the manager's eye, to which he slapped her in the face. He immediately regretted throwing hands and disappeared from the counter to go hide in his office. That's when the crazy officer. She started hollering at the top of her lungs, pushing stuff off the counter and throwing random objects into the kitchen. He threw over a cup of straw, spilling them all over the floor. What, y'all think I'm stupid? Think I can't count? I got a 10-piece, not a 9-piece. Maybe I rip off one of your fingers and see how you feel about it. She was making an awful scene. At that point, I couldn't help but look. Several of my co-workers went to the counter to try and calm her down or get her out of the restaurant, but she was inconsolable. She pulled on one of those plexiglass barriers that hangs in front of the cash register and hurled it towards somebody. It nearly stabbed their eye out. Still, the corner of the plexiglass sliced them in the temple, spurting blood all down their shirt. Let me see that witch that gave me my food. Come on, she needs a good beating. I realized she was talking about me. And that's when she jumped the counter. She locked eyes with me at the window and lunged, but she was caught by a small crowd of employees who got a hold of her and threw her out the door. But she ran. Several times she came back, actually. Every time we thought she was gone, she would storm back in and throw something else at the people in the kitchen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the manager came out and yelled at her. The cops are on their way. You really want to throw your life away over one chicken nugget? At that, she disappeared. The cops showed up about an hour later, asked a few questions, and took a copy of the security footage. I thought she would eventually get fined a few grand or spend a few nights in jail, but we never got word that she'd been caught. 3 or 4 months passed, the season changed, and I pretty much forgot about the whole thing. Pretty much everyone moved on, even the cops. Then, one day, I was working the drive-thru again, and I saw her. She came back with her boyfriend and ordered the exact same thing. My heart sank to the floor when she came up to the window, and I recognized her immediately. She still wore that same awful red wig, but this time she was even more insane-looking. She stared me down with this creepy, deranged smile, like some kind of psycho would look at their next victim. But she didn't say anything. She just took her food and drove off slowly, looking at me through the window until they were out of sight. I thought about calling the cops, but I figured she would leave once she counted all 10 of her nuggets. It gave me a jolt, forcing me to remember her little rampage back in August, but after a while I wasn't thinking about it. Several hours passed and the sun went down. Then I was done with my shift. Right before I walked out the door, I remembered that I'd seen her that day. Just as a precaution, I got out my keychain and clutched the little pink bottle of pepper spray. I'd had this thing since I was a sophomore in high school, about 6 years, so I was sure it was expired, but I figured it would be good enough. I pushed open the door and walked out with long, quick strides, headed for my car. Within seconds, I heard her walking behind me, racing to catch up with me, coming up so quickly that I was sure she was about to attack. Instinctively, I turned around and sprayed her straight in the eyes. Without bothering to linger for any reason, I turned back and ran to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, looking for the unlock button, I looked back to the woman with the insanely colored hair. She was still standing, but she was staggering. I saw her wipe her eyes vigorously and spit on the ground. Then she looked straight at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, all the skin around them swollen and red and covered in thick tears. She bared her teeth like a rabid animal, drooling. She screamed horridly, then charged at me unhindered. I pulled open the car door and jumped inside, locking it behind me. I thought I was safe, but before I could even calm my nerves enough to start my car, I saw a rock crashing into the window, smashing it like a wine glass. "Stop!" I shrieked, and then her hands came through the window. They grabbed me by the hair and yanked me through the door, all over the shards of glass and dropping me on the pavement while still grasping at my scalp. She struck me in the face repeatedly, using her nails like claws, cutting my face and eyes, slitting my lip and scarring my cheeks. "This will teach you to disrespect me, you little punk. You don't remember me." I don't know how long I was taking that for. I didn't fight back. I just clutched my car key so she wouldn't steal it. Eventually, I heard my manager come out and start yelling. That's when the crazy woman dropped me to the ground and ran off, disappearing once again. And what's worse, the police still haven't found her. They don't care enough about me to go looking, I guess. But she ruined my life. I quit my job after that day, and I moved back into my parents' house. I even missed my college graduation because my face was so messed up. I'm too scared to go outside. I'm just worried that I'm going to run into her, and she'll recognize me all over again. I was bone tired and starving that snowy night. The road was a treacherous white blanket, and visibility was near zero. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Relief finally washed over me when I saw the neon glow of the McDonald's sign in the snowstorm. I pulled into the empty parking lot, parked my car, and trudged through the thick snow. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with an irritating hum. The place was eerily deserted. Only 2 employees worked quietly in the kitchen. I shrugged off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine and walked to the counter. A young man with greasy hair and a vacant expression took my order, and he barely acknowledged me as he punched in my meal. I found a seat by the window, the snowstorm raging outside. The heat inside made me feel slightly drowsy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I waited for my food, my eyes wandered to the corner of the restaurant, where a clown statue stood. He was a typical Ronald McDonald figure, grinning eerily with his oversized shoes and bright red hair. I shivered and looked away. Minutes later, I heard a sinister laugh echo through the empty restaurant. I jerked my head up, but the 2 employees continued working as if nothing had happened. The laugh sounded again, this time closer, more menacing. I rubbed my arms, trying to ward off the chill that had settled over me. The lights flickered, and in the brief darkness, I saw the clown statue in a different position, its head tilted towards me. My heart pounded in my chest. "Did you guys hear that?" The employees didn't respond. They moved mechanically, almost if they were in a trance. I turned back to the clown, but it was in its original position. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. My food arrived, and I forced myself to eat, but the unease gnawed at me. Halfway through my meal, I noticed a message written in ketchup on my tray. Don't trust Ronald. My blood ran cold. I looked around, but there was no one else in the restaurant. The employees were still in the kitchen. I felt a presence behind me and spun around, but there was nothing there. The lights flickered again, and in the brief darkness I saw the clown figure standing in the corner, watching me. This isn't real. It's just in my imagination. I whispered to myself, but the fear was real, tangible. I glanced at the window and saw the cloud's reflection grinning wickedly. But when I turned to look, it wasn't there. My breathing became shallow. I was panicking. I had to get out of there. I stood up, my legs trembling. The restaurant seemed to close in on me, the air thick and oppressive. I stumbled towards the door, but before I could reach it, the employee stepped into my path. Are you okay, miss? You look like you've seen a ghost. His eyes were dark, almost predatory. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet felt like stone. He smiled, but there was something off-putting about his smile. If you'd like to accompany me back to the kitchen, I might have some extra chicken burgers for you on the house. Something about his tone, his expression, sent a jolt of terror through me. I forced myself to speak. I don't know. What's your name? Come on, it'd be a shame to waste good burgers. I was hungry, so reluctantly I agreed. You're Teresa, right? I remember from the order. Yes. And you are? Ronald. Sorry, I forgot my tag today. My blood turned to ice. The message in ketchup flashed in my mind. I backed away, shaking my head. His smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. I burst through the door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. But I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I finally managed to unlock the door and threw myself inside, locking it behind me. I drove away as fast as the snow-covered roads would allow, not daring to look back. My mind raced, replaying the events in a nightmarish loop. A week later, the news broke. 2 employees at that McDonald's had been arrested for the murder of 3 women. Their bodies were found preserved in the freezer. One of the employees was named Ronald. The news confirmed my worst fears. I had been inches away from becoming their next victim. I like to believe that it was the spirit of one of the victims which saved me that day. To believe that everything happens for a reason. I was never one of those people who believed in fate, but that day, I refused to believe that I'm only alive because of the mercy of a psychopath who wasn't in his right mind. My name is Roy, and I was working at McDonald's in San Isidro during the massacre of '84. But this story is not about that horrible massacre that took the lives of 21 people, but about my experience with a psychopath in the days leading up to it. I was quite young at the time, and the job at McDonald's paid well. It wasn't my destiny to spend my whole life there either. It was a simple routine job that helped me pay the bills. Among the regular customers were James Huberty. He came in almost every day, always alone, always ordering the same thing: a cheeseburger, medium fries, and a Coke. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were laden with paranoia and always made my hair stand on end. Huberty was not an easy man to ignore. He had a haunting presence, a kind of dark aura that seemed to follow him wherever he went. The other employees always kept their distance, glancing nervously at each other whenever he came in. Rumor had it that he had been fired from several jobs and was having problems at home, but no one dared to ask him directly. What bothered me most was the way his eyes roamed the place, as if he was looking for something or someone in every nook and cranny. Huberty was always a paranoid man. He felt that everyone, especially the government, was watching him and even conspiring against him. Huberty had a very bad relationship with all the employees, but they couldn't fire him, since so far he hadn't done anything serious enough to be banned. In any case, all of us who worked there knew that sooner or later he would be. It was only a matter of time before Huberty hurt someone. To our surprise, he did a lot more than that. When Huberty would come in, I was usually the one who would go to him. I was the one who saw Huberty as a poor man, someone who should be locked up in a mental institution to get the help he needed. I was the only one who wasn't afraid of him, and that's why Huberty came to respect me. Although there were days when his paranoia was so high that he didn't even recognize me. One afternoon, after his usual order, he stared at me. His eyes were two dark wells of distrust and fear. He leaned forward and in a hoarse whisper spoke to me. "Let's get this over with. Tell me the truth. Are you with the government?" I froze for a moment, trying to process the question. James looked more nervous than usual, his face sweaty and his hands shaking. "No, man, I just work here. I don't work with the government, nor do I intend to. Does that calm you down?" "No, because I know you're lying to me. Seriously, tell me the truth. And don't lie to me. I know I'm being watched. I know I'm being watched. I can feel it. James, how long have you been coming here? I always treat you the best way and leave you alone to eat. Trust me, I'm not with the government, okay?" "It's okay. I believe you." I nodded slowly, not knowing what else to say. James picked up his food and left, but I could understand all of James's gestures. It was obvious that he didn't believe me in the slightest. That day ended normally. After lunch, James simply got up and left. That day was quieter, and to my surprise, the next day he didn't go. We didn't hear from him for a while. Everything was going back to normal at McDonald's, until I saw him again. A few days passed, I finished my shift and went out the back door. It was a quiet afternoon, the sun was starting to go down, and the parking lot was almost empty. Suddenly, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Before I could turn around, I felt a sharp blow to the back of my head that sent me crashing to the ground. As I tried to get up, I saw James standing over me, his face marred by uncontrollable rage and fear. He had a baseball bat in his hand. "I trusted you! Why did you lie today? Are you with them?" "No, James, I swear I'm not!" The bat came down hard, impacting against my arm. I felt a sharp pain as if it had broken into 1,000 pieces. I screamed, but the parking lot was empty and no one was coming to help me. James continued his attack, his movements increasingly frantic and uncoordinated. Each blow was harder than the last. I could see in his eyes how the rage was leaving, replaced by eyes that showed utter madness. James was losing his mind. I could see him foaming at the mouth. He was like a rabid animal that was already so focused on hitting me that he wasn't even aiming. He could hit me in the arm, hit me in the leg, hit me in the head, and kill me, or even miss and hit the ground. I tried to roll to the side to escape his blows, but he followed me, raising the bat again and again. I felt every bone in my body flinch with each impact as my vision began to blur. In the distance, I heard the sound of a car passing by, but no one was stopping. They weren't even noticing what was happening since we were in the back of the McDonald's. I had to do something. If James hadn't caught me by surprise, I probably would have been able to get the bat out of him, but it was too late. My bones were broken. I could barely move, only to complain about the terrible pain I was in. Suddenly, James stopped. He froze completely. His breathing was heavy and ragged, his eyes wilder than ever. He just stood there, staring at me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. For a moment I thought he was done, that he wouldn't hurt me anymore, and he came to recognize me. He had probably realized by now that I wasn't with the government or watching him. But then he dropped the bat and pulled a knife out of his pocket, a long, sharp kitchen knife. "I can't let them catch me." He raised the knife and this time brought it down directly on the pain was excruciating, a burning that went all the way through me. I tried to scream, but only a choked moan came out. Ah, please. James, I told you I'm not from the government. I won't do anything to you." James didn't even look me in the eyes to answer me. Instead, he took a second to turn around and look behind him, then looked around. This man was suffering from another one of his paranoia episodes, but this was the strongest I'd ever seen in my life. "Of course you're going to tell me that, but even if you're not from the government, you've seen too much already. You will surely accuse me of them. I'm sorry, but I can't let you live." The world around me began to fade. My thoughts became blurred and confused. I could only think of surviving, of finding a way to escape from this man who had become a monster. Suddenly, I heard a police siren behind me and a car speeding up. Damn! I knew you were with them. Damn it! I won't get caught. You hear me? They have nothing on me. It's their war against mine. Immediately after that, the man ran away, leaving me bleeding on the floor as I slowly lost consciousness. I had no partner nearby. I was feeling very tired, and my whole body ached. I tried to get up, but my body was no longer responding. My eyes began to close. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, surrounded by machines and lights. My body was in a mass of pain, and I could barely move. A doctor explained to me that I had suffered multiple fractures and contusions, and that it was a miracle I was alive. It seems that when I collapsed, a fellow worker came out to his break and saw me on the floor, almost dead. That siren that James had heard was the police siren, but they hadn't put it on to get him. It was just a quirk of fate that saved my life. I didn't go to work the next day. I could barely move, and the thought of going back to that place filled me with indescribable terror. Want more signs of fate? It was on that day that the massacre occurred. I watched the news from my hospital bed, the screen showing scenes of horror and mayhem. Puberty had entered the McDonald's armed to the teeth and had begun shooting anyone who moved. The final tally of dead wounded was devastating. I never saw James Huberty again. He died that day, shot by the police, but I still remember his face perfectly. His eyes were full of paranoia, his nervous face, the constant movements of his hand. James Huberty may have become a ruthless killer in his last moments of life, but it still doesn't change my opinion of him. This man is also a victim who did not receive the treatment and support he should have received. And for that, not only did he pay, but so did 21 other people.